Collective, it's Al. I'm coming to you with a video that will be a standalone piece for the YouTube audience that I did not expect to be recording, but was actually told that it was not a request, it was more of a requirement. So here we are. And it basically surrounds a growing concern from the higher realms related to the topic of avoiding content that is profiting off of the misery and suffrage of other people, especially during 2025, where we've already started off in such a powerful way with what's happening here in my beautiful city of angels. So essentially what I was tasked with doing is kind of grounding the energy for those of you who are at a higher vibration to remember that there will be people who claim to be of service to the divine, or there will be people who claim to be of light, who will be using tragedies and things that happen to other people as a means to profit off of ratings or higher viewership or whatnot. And it's important for us to be band together as a community spiritually to remind each other that it's important to avoid such vibrations, such lower vibrational people, because of the fact that the energy that they're putting out we are receiving, and that it actually can bring us consequences as well. And the way that I really wanted to kind of ground the energy is to remind you that no matter what economic backgrounds people come from, or no matter what region of the country or the world that they live in, they are still human beings in the end. And our task as spiritualists here is not to profit off of their misery or to say, oh, I told you this would happen and so forth, but to rather rally around them, sending positive energy, transmuting the pain and suffrage that they're going through, reminding each other that they are in the end humans. And as human beings, they are but reflections of you, just in another body, and more importantly, a reflection of the great architect in different aspects. So it's important for all of us to kind of rally around each other at this time and remind you that it is important to avoid content that profits off of the misery of other people. And essentially what that basically breaks down to is to ground the energy in a way that we can relate. And so I just wanted to remind you all, for those of you who have never been to the Los Angeles area, it is not exactly the way that a lot of people are pushing it. Pacific Palisades in particular is not necessarily a hotspot for all celebrities. It's just peppered with a couple of them. But technically that area began in the early 80s, and it was grandfathered in, meaning a lot of those families that live there are actually people who saved all of their money, had nothing to do with the industry, and happened to buy property in that area before it became relevant or before it became a hotspot. And many of them are not affluent. Indeed, they are just everyday citizens who work everyday jobs. And many of them have not only lost their jobs, but have lost their businesses. And a lot of people then have also lost their ability to make money. And so it's a trickle-down effect that is going to be quite dire for a great many people. And we as spiritualists can be there for each other, even if it's just energetically or through prayer. And it's important for us to avoid content that preys upon agenda or fear-mongering that spreads, hypocrisy or different types of rumors in order to push themselves forward in our eyes. And indeed, it actually just shows their ass of them. But it's important for us to then really, really ground it and remember that these people individually have a lot of things that they're going to be going through beyond just the fire, right? And this is honest talk between us at a higher level, involving things as basic as the fact that now they're going to be going to a journey where they are displaced, and many of them will be facing price gouging as they try to find home, and they're going to then be dealing with a lot of people who are mean and quite vitriol with them because they claim that they have money, not realizing that many of them are single-family homes where people have spent all of their life working as hard as they can to get their little patch of heaven on earth, which is a requirement and a desire for all of us. And now they've lost it, and with no extended family and whatnot, they're really on their own. So aside from the price gouging that's going to happen, they are now displaced, and it's going to be a big crisis in the housing market, which will affect everyone in the City of Angels. And there are a lot of people who are very poor in the City of Angels who will be pushed out further. And for those of you who remember the pandemic in particular, you will see the parallels between why I had mentioned last year and the years before that 2020 to 2025 was the dry run, and the 2025 the real shit would go down. So it's important to remember that one of the things that's going to happen for a lot of these people is beyond the price gouging and the displacement and kind of the backlash that they're facing for no reason of their own, because Eaton Canyon has nothing to do with Pacific Palisades. It's a part of Altadena, and Altadena is a very, very minority-driven neighborhood. These people literally were there before it became a place where anybody would want to live, and so now they're shit out of luck, and they're going to be facing a lot of problems, including food, where they're going to live, and how long can they live there. Then they have to go through these the insurance policies and all of the bullshit's going to happen there, which is why in my last post related to this topic at the top of this year, I had made a comment about the fact that time is going to move exceedingly slow for them. As someone who has lost everything a couple times in my life, I can tell you that time moves very slowly, and a lot of anger and depression and sadness will grow within our own fellow brothers and sisters, who will then be walking down this journey together, although feeling completely isolated and alone. They don't know how they're going to make it through it. Many of them don't know where they're going to go. They can't live with their families forever. I mean, this is like a big deal. And a lot of the things that are going to happen is that they're also going to have a job market issue because of the fact that a lot of the businesses that were there no longer are viable for people to work there. So all of those people will then be moving into the market within Los Angeles, and that will push a lot of other people out of their positions. This literally has a domino effect and is one of many that will be happening for 2025. So what I wanted to say relating to the topic is this is not something that we can just pass on because it looks like it's done, the fire's out, and that's all we can do. This is going to be a long-term effect because the same energy that we're sending to them and healing and helping them at this time will be much needed for us as we each go through our own set of tower moments. Because I told you guys 2025 is basically a wild ride, and we need to really be there for each other starting from the very beginning. And the same amount of energy that we're putting out is what we will be receiving back. And it's important to remind people who do have negative comments to say or feel like that's just deserved, that they deserved what came to them, to remind them that those are the same people who helped you during Hurricane Katrina, who helped you during all the Florida hurricanes, who helped you during tornadoes, during 9/11, school shootings. All of the people that you vilify in this situation are some of the biggest contributors and donators to all of the crises that we face in our states and also in the world. So it's important to really, really look into the mirror at this point and remind each other that the divine does not speak in hatred or intolerance. He speaks in love, compassion, empathy, humility, and kindness. Kindness being the predominant force here. So it's important for everyone to kind of just ground their energies right now and really think about what it would be like for them to be in those shoes and really look into the mirror and see what it is you can do, if anything. Instead of feeding into the agenda-driven bullshit and all of the things that, fear propaganda and so forth and conspiracy theory and all that stuff, what can we do to be of service now? And for many of you, it can be as simple as sitting down and really praying on behalf of all of them, because there's thousands of people who are now going through the worst time of their life. It's one thing to build, if you really think about it, it's one thing to dream, to have your dream experience, then to actually manifest it, and then to have it ripped from you in such a catastrophic way is quite traumatic. And the sheer depression and all of the thoughts that will be coming into their mind as this drags on over the years is going to be quite trying for a lot of people. And so for those of you who have ever lost everything or have really been through like Hurricane Katrina or any of those natural disasters can attest, it's a very heartbreaking experience when you're walking through it. And we don't want to leave anyone behind, and we don't want to alienate people. We don't want to feed into this fear-mongering agenda that they deserve to, because how can anyone deserve to lose everything that they've worked their entire life for? And they lost their schools, everything. So it's important for us to really look at each other at this moment and realize that if we are truly divine beings, we will not be putting any attention to content that is fear-driven or that is trying to make themselves appear better than they are because they may have been a seer or whatnot. And remind them that if that is true, that if you are indeed right, then the gift that has been given to you can as easily be given away. The higher realms work in an elegant way. There's something about grace, and it's something that you can see that is a testimony to the person that you're always looking at. If they behave in a way that's graceful and manage to balance the scales and with their everyday life and are very humble and kind, then you will notice a clear distinction between them and the others who are basically saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. I'm going to use the suffering of other people to push my own conspiracy theory or agenda, which does of no service to helping the people at the time. And so you can remove yourself from that sort of content and kind of look at it from a more abstract way, ground your energies and go, okay, well, I can pray for them. I can send $10 to different charities, which is what I'm doing, which is just spreading it across whatever I can. I live in Los Angeles, so when I have a chance, I might even volunteer. But I'm going to wait till it starts to trickle down a little bit where people stop showing up as much, and I'm going to kind of jump in at that point because it's a lot easier for me to be of service at a time because I know it's going to be a long journey. So there are different ways that we can all help, and if you have no money, that's okay. You can literally send prayers, and you can send cards, and you can do all sorts of things and toys and stuff like that to help the communities, because a lot of these people have children, and the children are feeding off the energy that they're receiving, and they know that they've lost everything. Their parents are completely feeling destroyed. There's just so much energy going on that we can transmute at an individual level. So if you are truly of spiritual origin and you really believe you work for the divine, there's a multitude of ways that you can check in with your guides or whoever it is that will help you better understand how you can be of service at this time. Because this is just the first domino. There's much more dominoes to come, and we're going to need to rely on each other. But for those of you who are feeling a little bit strained with the fact that you saw part of this coming, and that you have been talking about it with your communities and stuff like that and kind of preparing them for 2025, what I would say is they wanted me to ground that particular experience in a way that makes more sense to more people, which is you can always lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And one of the things about truly being a divine being is that you understand that not always are people going to listen to you because maybe they're not meant to. Your task is not always to be right or validated. Sometimes it's just to be of service to the divine and act as a compassionate, loving guide or helper. But that doesn't mean people are going to listen to you. So we have to start learning to remove our ego from the experience and understand that though we may have warned that this was about to happen, that we need to understand that you can't make someone hear you. And you have to understand that even when things go down, the last thing you want to do is bring attention to yourself, being like, I told you. That doesn't help anybody. It actually builds more, it blocks you with more doors than it does an opening them. So it's important to remember that everything happens in divine timing. And you have to understand that when it comes down to the nitty gritty of it, you're on the path not to be right, but to be of service. And when your service is called upon, the world will see you. It's not something you need to bring attention to yourself. But one of the things that they wanted me to share with you was how I dealt with that particular part of it. Because for those of you who follow me on LinkedIn, you knew that at the last day of 2024, I had specifically said that 2025 was going to be all about communities and it was going to be very trying for us and that we needed to band together no matter what. And I linked the movie The Wild Robot to that particular piece. And I said to the LinkedIn community and any of my followers, I said, all of the information you're going to need for 2025 is basically a synopsis of this particular movie, and you guys know what happens in The Wild Robot. So instead of referencing it, what my guides wanted me to do when the fires broke out and so forth is they wanted me to sit in grace, meditate, and really transmute energy and send as much healing and loving energy as I could before I spoke on the topic. And when I did speak to it, I made a very beautiful little note basically on my LinkedIn account where instead of referencing the fact that I had warned that these things were coming to, all I said was, this is why, I had done the introduction, I put in the third paragraph, this is why, and for the last post of 2024, I said that this would all come down to communities and to being there for each other. Notice that there was no reference to, I told you this was going to happen, or or we've been saying that stuff like this was going to go down. I didn't do that. Instead, the divine just wanted me to act in a way that just reminded them what was important, and that is to band together as a community, as Americans, or as world citizens, to remember that we are brothers and sisters, and instead focus not on what I had said was going to happen, but more on the overall message, which is love, compassion, empathy, humility, kindness, and love. And that's a very important distinction for us to make, especially when you guys start navigating the seas of uncertainty that come with 2025. The 20th is coming very quickly. I think it's in 5 days, if I'm not wrong, on the calendar, which means that there's a lot of shit that's going to go down for that. And we're going to need to rise above the rhetoric and above the knee-jerk reactions of ego and pride and actually just really humble ourselves and be like, okay, what can we do to help our fellow man? Because these things are not going away, and it's just going to be one of those things where we really, really, really need to show up compassionately and have the heart of the lion, have the heart of Jesus, and have the heart of whoever you belong to, whatever your faith-based structure is, to understand that what they need right now is the love and kindness from you, and not the vitriol or feeding into the negativity of their economic background and whatnot, but instead realize that in the end they're just humans, and if it can happen to them, it can certainly happen to us. For those of you who didn't know, the Hollywood fire that broke out is near my house, and we had the evacuation warnings and so forth, and so I had everything ready to go. And the only reason I'm bringing that up is because it affects everybody. What you guys don't know about the location of California is that a lot of the places that were on fire were brush fires, and it was spread throughout the canyons and so forth. But when the Hollywood fire broke out, it broke out right on Hollywood Boulevard. It was coming down towards Hollywood Boulevard and Cahuenga, and if it would have gone any further, it would have been apartment building after apartment building after apartment building. LA is not all millionaires. There's a lot of us who live as best we can, but we live in neighborhoods built of apartments right next to each other. There's no brush fire to burn. It would just be building to building to building. So a lot of us have had to be very grateful for the fact that we were spared in these type of situations, but it doesn't change the fact that we feel the energy, and not only that, but the heaviness of the air, which for those of you who haven't been into Los Angeles while this was all happening, our allergies were all over the place. There's been all sorts of stuff that we've been breathing in, and there's not really any escape. So this has a lot of long-term effects that affect not just the people who are directly affected, but it trickles out very quickly to everyone else. So when we move forward with this, it's important to remember that this is one of those events that we knew was going to happen. We knew that there's still going to be the solar flares. We know that the hurricane season is going to be pretty bad. We know that tornadoes are going to be pretty vicious this year. We know there's a lot of shit going down, and we have the inauguration, and we have a new presidency, and we have all this other stuff going on. So this is what I would call the great humbling, a moment in time where we all have to really, really relax into ourselves and remember that we are human beings and that we are reflections of the great architect, and everything that we're willing onto another person is being received by the great architect, who is the recipient of that, right? If we are indeed in a hall of mirrors, then you understand that every one of us is a different aspect of the divine on a different journey, and each of us have different missions. So if you're a spiritual leader, this is the time that you band together your community and you start figuring out what you can do to be of service, because you realize that it's going to be across the board for the country and across the world, and that we need to be prepared for how to best respond to crisis when it happens. And for many of it's just going to be knowing when to resolve yourself to understanding that sometimes things are out of our control, and when the dominoes begin to fall, they are falling for a reason. But sometimes it has nothing to do with karma. And one of the things that we as spiritualists have to remind people is that sometimes it just has to do with an accidental thing that happened. Los Angeles was hit with 100-mile winds that day. And even if it was purposely or accidentally, it was the winds that drove the fire the most ferociously. And so it's important to understand that when we face some of this stuff, to not sit there and allow ourselves to feel victimized by what's going on, and to remind other people that they will make it through, and the only thing we can do is be the ear that listens to them as they go through the frustration and the crying and the anger of not getting what they deserve, and like the insurance companies and their big bag of bullshit. I mean, this is a big deal. And so what we can do as pillars of hope and of destiny is to remind people that things happen to good people, and that we are not going to be part of the sweeping generalization that is because they are adjacent to Hollywood. But instead, we're just going to understand that things happen in the universe, and that from ashes, phoenixes will rise, and the challenges are there for a reason. And if we can humanize it and experience it as universal, then we bring truly of service to the divine. So for those of you who are feeling the knee-jerk reaction to use this type of situation, and all of them to come, as a means to boost your ratings or your whatever it is, I just wanted to tell you what they told me, which is there are greater consequences to acting as though you are acting on behalf of the divine when you are acting on behalf of spiritual ego, and that there are severe consequences to everything that you do going forward. And the reason I was told to say that specifically is because many of us, really mean the world well. But there comes a moment where we get frustrated, where we're not getting where we need to go, and we don't understand that patience is a virtue. And so we try to rush ahead things, and basically in the form of basically saying, look at me, I'm trying to tell you everything's going to happen, understanding that if you were meant to be seen at that time, you would be seen. And so you're acting out of ego in those situations, and those of us who are watching you act in those ways are having a bad taste left in our mouth. And if that's happening at our level as a human being in the 3D, you can only imagine the bad taste that's growing in the higher realms. Because there's an elegance to the way that they operate, and one of the things that they don't tolerate is that type of behavior. And for those of you who are part of the ascension process, you really have to understand that the people who ascend are people who are humble. They're kind, they're compassionate. These are people who leave legacies that are built with love, not with hatred. The people who rise to the occasion, who have a legacy that's immortal, like the Buddha or Jesus or Mother Teresa, are built in a place of love and light. Their legacy is not built on trying to get attention, but instead if you look at them, the attention comes to them because it's time. So understand where your spiritual ego lies, and understand that the closer you stand to the light, the bigger the shadow you can cast. Just be careful that the world doesn't then interpret you as a false person, because a true spiritualist is not here to be seen all the time. Instead, they're trying to do something of service for humanity. So when you're ingesting content and people who are fear-mongering or who are using it to somehow propel themselves forward, understand that you are ingesting that toxic energy, and you can quickly just turn it off. If you are the people who are perpetrating this, understand that you're going to face consequences, and it's going to be very, very uncomfortable for you. Because you're basically preying upon the misery of another person who had a tower moment and then will be the same person who claims to be victimized when the tower hits you back immediately. Because that's how, that is karmic. But to then label this entire crisis, or people who go through hurricanes or whatever natural disasters, as its karmic retribution is irresponsible and not of divine origin, right? We live in the United States, we live in one of the most powerful countries in the world. And when you have that much surplus, obviously you're going to have more natural disasters, because you still need to be challenged and you still need to evolve. But telling somebody that when they're going through the worst part of their journey is not loving, it's not responsible, and it really hurts other people. So in the end, just please understand that everyone is being looked at this point. This is the era of judgment. Not only are we using the discernment of our own good judgment, but we are being judged as well for the actions that we take in response to the tragedy or unfortunate events that happen to other people. Understanding that anything that you put out into the world is like a boomerang. It'll come right back to you. So if you send a lot of love and light into the world, and you band together as a community, and you show how communities coming together can strengthen even the worst of situations, then you are truly in divine light, and you're acting in divine order. And those of you who are part of that legacy will be known the world over. Again, remember who is known worldwide. Mother Teresa, Princess Diana, Martin Luther King, all of these people did service for humanity and fought very hard for the betterment of our world. They didn't relish in the suffering of other people. Instead, they stood against that. And that is what the divine is asking of all of us at this time, especially during 2025. Moving forward, this is going to be a very polarizing year. And there's a lot of shit that's going to happen with this particular presidency, good or bad. And it's important for us to be able to remove our emotions long enough to understand that just because someone does something and we react negatively to it doesn't give us any more power in the situation. In fact, it disempowers us, because now we're reacting as opposed to being in control of what's going on. And the reason I say that is because the wheel turns in multiple directions. And some of you in the spiritual community are going to be blessed in spite of whatever else is going on in the world. And we're going to need to remember to be grateful and to celebrate our own personal victories in spite of the fact that other people may not be having the best of luck at the time. But to not relish in the fact that you are doing better than anyone else, but instead be very graceful and very quiet about it and humble and thank the universe for whatever blessings you have. Understand that you should celebrate it on your own behalf, but then understand what you can do to maybe use your blessings to be of service to other people. That's how that keeps flowing. It's part of the flow in the natural course of life. But it's important for us to really ground our energies as we start, because this happened only 2 weeks into January of 2025. Like, the year already started off with a fucking bang. And that's just like a prelude of what's to come. So what I would say is, for those of you who are coming into blessings, please take the opportunity to be grateful to the universe and to really converse with your spirit guides. But ask how you can then use those blessings to bless other people. Because that's super important in a time, especially when there might be a lot of crisis or a lot of different things going on because of politics or because of the natural disasters or because of war or whatever it is. This is a time for us to really come towards each other. And one of the things I said that I'm really going to point out is that when you're in your darkest of places, you are the most vulnerable. And the last thing we want to do as spiritualists is feed into that vulnerability that makes them angry at the wrong reasons and doesn't help them heal. The journey to healing is one that's a progression. It's a process that you go up. And what we can do sometimes to be of service is to just be the ear that listens to someone at their worst time, if they're screaming or yelling or crying or whatever it is. We stand with them and we listen to them and we try to remind them that from the ashes, phoenixes will rise, and that we understand what they're going through. But this is going to happen in different zones in different parts of the world throughout the year. And it's important for us to be the pillars of hope and of clarity to remind people that no matter what your personal belief is of an enemy, you never want to put out the energy that you wish them ill will, because you are just wishing yourself the same ill will. It's a circle moment. And so one of the things that we can do for each other is just do what I'm doing here, or do what you're doing on your channels, or however we come into contact with each other. And just remind each other how much love we have for each other, even if we've never met. It's super important for us to remember that we as a collective, as part of the humanity, HUE-MANIT, are just the souls on stage that are in Technicolor. If you really want to look at the Earth Academy in a very interesting way, just think about the Wizard of Oz and how the rest of the world, the actual world in which Dorothy lives, was in black and white. right? So the universe is basically black and white. We don't see a lot of the different energies that surround us all the time, but they do exist. We don't see it. We are the beings of the rainbow. We are the rainbow beings who are on stage, and we are of service or being watched and so forth and being guided and helped and along our spiritual journeys, and we are here to be of service. So, but we're on a stage. And so what you do with the empowerment that you receive or the blessings that you have has a trickle effect that can actually help other people when they're at their worst. And that's basically the message of what I was trying to say. In the end, no matter who you are, this affects everyone equally because what can happen to them can happen to us at any given moment. And there are many of us within the collective consciousness who don't even have insurance because we live in apartments or, we rent. So we don't really have that opportunity. So it just reminds us, no matter how much money you have or whoever you are in the world, natural disaster or tragedy can hit you at any point in time. And instead of relishing in someone else's suffering, why not instead be compassionate and loving towards them and show the example of what it is to be a family? Because we are a family. The world, humanity, is one species. It's all one reflection of the great architect in different forms, and different thought forms for that matter. And so it's important to remember that as we move forward, because what happens to them is happening to us. And it's something that really, really evolved spiritualists can attest to. We understand the energy, and we have a lot of work to do here, and we'll have even more work to do as we go forward. And the more grounded we are at the beginning of the year, and the more together we are, and the vision that we have for each other to help everybody, as many as we can, to make it through, is really important for us to ground at this time, because it's already started. So understand that in the end, there's no real right or wrong reason to approach the world, but understand that energy is currency. And the currency that you're putting out into the world is super important at this time, especially when a great deal of many people are going through the worst parts of their life. And I say that because I will say it again. There's nothing worse than being at the worst part of your life and to really hit the depression mark where you think you're 100% isolated. So the reason the message is so important is because it's not just that the fires are out now. Here's the real work. The real work is now from here on out so they get their new home. That is layered with depression and anger and drinking and alcohol and drugs. I mean, there's so many things that can happen to someone who's in the dark night of their soul process, which is something that we had talked about last year that I had warned us, which was for spiritualists, one of the hardest things about 2025 is going to be watching other people go through a dark night of the soul. And we've already started, right? That's one group of people, but it's an entire community. And so understand that witnessing it can be just as trying as having gone through it yourselves. Because obviously not everyone has been through that particular situation, but many of us have lost everything and don't have pictures and all that stuff because of choices we made or because of hurricanes or whatever else that happened. We understand the pain that comes from that. But there is such a negative kind of part to this particular crisis that is testing humanity to see if they can rise above their own egos and their own opinions in order to really be of service, right? Because it's a knee-jerk reaction to be like, oh, they have millions of dollars. No, they don't all have millions of dollars. In fact, most of them don't. And that's kind of the crisis that we're facing. Can humanity rise above its shadow nature and see the fact that they're still human beings and they need us? And they need us to band together. And we need to really block ourselves from any content that is driven towards dividing us at this time because we're going to need each other. This family, humankind, is going to have to come together in the next 2 years. And these different events are all initiations, if you will, into who we are as beings and as people. So really think about that as we move through this year and understand that this is the first domino, okay? Well, how do we ground that energy now so that we are of service consistently throughout the year? Because we are equally being tested by witnessing it as they are being tested by going through it. It's just that we're at different levels. And who you are will be defined by how you respond to other people in crisis. This is about being a human being light post. You are a guide. You are a helper. You love your fellow man. And this is where what is that expression? This is where you put your money where your mouth is. This is where we show who we truly are and how we behave and who we surround ourselves with. I'll give you a perfect example as I close out. During the fires, because I was given the evacuation, I decided that if I was going to evacuate, I didn't know where I was going. I'm the only one in my family, I'm the last one, so I didn't know where I was going. So I went to a bar and I sat there with a friend of mine as the fire was coming down. And I had my headphones on trying to meditate and trying to figure out what I was going to do. I've been through, several different situations in my life where I've lost everything. So I kind of understood what I was going to be doing, but I didn't know in the moment how it was going to play out. And so as I'm sitting there, I took my headphones off to talk to my friend who's a bartender at the bar. And I look over and there are these people that I know socially that are sitting over talking to each other, and I can hear them, and they are enjoying the fact that these people that they say that they had it coming. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay. And so instead of getting angry about it, I made a conscious decision to just not talk to them. And so what I did is I got myself up out of that situation. I went to the back, had a cigarette. I came back and repositioned myself in another part of the bar. And I began to observe how the people were acting and reacting to the situation as it was playing out. And I really started to learn a great deal about humanity in those moments, which is low vibrational people relish in other people suffering, right? Because they feel like they're owed something by the world. Whereas high vibrational people don't do that. They look at them and they realize that it's just another version of the great architect in pain. And so in that moment, what I decided to do, which is something that is kind of spreading throughout our city right now, which is we're not getting into the gossip of it. We're not getting into the hearsay of it. We're not getting into the opinions of others. We're standing alone on our mountaintops and we're saying we're not going to act like that. We're going the other direction. And you're going to see that play out in a much more broader sense as we go forth through 2025, and especially as we head into 2026. I don't know exactly what that big event is towards the end of 2025, but it's a big one. But I know that there's a lot that's going to be happening. So be the pebble of change in your community that stands for right relations, meaning that when people say something like that, just either tell them to stop or just remove yourself from the situation and know that they're not in alignment with you. Because this is going to be a very, very, a very, very clear definition of who people are. And it's important for you to see them clearly when they act in those ways. Because you don't want to be associated with people who are that vibration if you're at a higher vibration, because then it sucks you into a vortex downwards. And instead, you want to be going up. You want to be moving up the ladder, not down the ladder in descension. So it's important for you to really, really be clear in times of crisis within your community, to really, really stop and listen to the people around you that you associate yourself with. Because a lot of karma and a lot of things that can happen will be part of that whole, relations. Like, who are your partnerships with? Who are you friends with? Because a lot of that will be indicative as mirrors to who you are. And you don't want to be seen in the wrong light by the higher realms. And you have to know yourself well enough to go, I'm not going to tolerate that type of behavior. And you have to be able to stand for that even in times of crisis and where you feel like you're already alone. It's important to remember who you are and what your vibration is, and to ensure that you protect that. And sometimes you're going to have to be extra observant of the people around you, because they are themselves tests. Do you sit there and gossip about these people and talk about, how Paris Hilton lives there, she deserves it, blah, 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 blah. You're listening and ingesting that, and you're not getting up and moving. That is very telling of who we are. And it's important to really, really ground our energies and to understand that what we ingest is part of our currency. And it's important to remove ourselves and to be like, absolutely not. I got my ass up out of there, actually. To be honest with you, I told my friend I'd see him later, and he was listening to the conversation. He goes, no, I get it. Because I said to him, I'm like, part of the task of as a true spiritualist is to bring unity to the world. It's to bring compassion, love, and empathy to everyone. And we don't have to agree with everybody. But what I'm not going to tolerate is people profiting or enjoying the suffering of other people around me. And I'm certainly not going to let people gossip about other people and call them names when they're not even there to defend themselves. That's just a personal decision I have had to make. But I'm just going to say that as a peer group, for those of you who are spiritual, you're going to have to make those tough decisions as well. Because we are splitting. Half is going up in ascension, and the other half is descending. The descenders are going to descend. You can't save people. They have to be willing to do the work, and they have to even be willing to listen to you. So if you tell somebody, please stop talking about that, and they don't listen to you, then you already have your answer. That's not someone coming with you. So just be advised that this is really the era of judgment in all forms, where you have to use your own judgment as to how to proceed forward, because the energy that we put out into the world has immediate reactions at this point in time. And I just want you guys to be surrounded in love and light and understand that that's the most predominant thing that we need right now, and to really watch your energy and watch what you consume and what you ingest in life, because it's very telling. Remember, I made a comment last year about wondering if we are indeed in a hall of mirrors. Because if you really look at the procession of life, you understand that the same type of mentalities tend to group together. That's how businesses are formed. And the same type of group mentality is how people choose their colleges and how they choose their fraternities or sororities. It's like-minded individuals. So you want to be at this time grounded in an energy and a peer group that reflects your own standards of operation and your higher vibrations. And avoid people who are pretending to be at a high vibration but are actually spreading and disseminating low vibrational behavior. You can separate yourself in a way that's much more healthy for you because you are going to be part of a community that is there to rebuild, that is there to be supportive, that is there to be loving, and you will separate yourself from anybody who's not at that vibration. This is very important for all of us at this time, and I hope you guys take that to heart. Because in the end, we are brothers and sisters, and whether we like each other or not is irrelevant to the situation. Humanity has to rise. It has to make it past these tests, and some of the tests are really hard to watch, and some of them we will have to go through ourselves. And so the energy we put out into the universe in relation to tragedy or catastrophes that happen around the world is a reflection of who we are and where we are in the evolutionary ladder. So if you really want to stand in divine light and you want to say that you are acting on behalf of the divine, then you have to really understand the elegance and grace that comes with knowing how to operate in situations like this. Because many of you have had training experiences within your own life where you have faced the worst part of humanity. And so you'll be able to help other people navigate around that in a way that's healthy and that doesn't take freedom away from them. And that's a powerful individual. So to the spiritual community, just be advised of what's going on around you. Be very clear on who you surround yourself with and make sure you're in right relations to the situations going on. Because anything that happens to someone else can always happen to you. Sometimes tower moments have to happen to realign a person. I'm not saying that about the fires because that's a completely different thing because that affected a lot of people and a lot of innocent people as well. But there are things that happen in our individual lives that we have gone through that we then look back on and go, oh, thank God that happened to me even though it was the worst part of our life. Right? But that's in a personal dynamic. But we understand from those experiences how to then help other people who maybe didn't have the tower moment because of their own actions, but because of relations or closeness to just a fire that breaks out, right? But your life experience has taught you how to help people heal. And the process here is how do we help as many of them heal? And how many of them can we ensure that we don't leave behind? Because there's nothing more devastating to someone than to lose everything they've ever worked for, right? So understand the mental headspace of the people that are going through this together and how isolating it feels to them as they battle the insurance companies and all of the price gouging and the job loss. Like there's a lot that's going on in their heads that we as spiritualists can see beyond the veil of the mask at what's going on and can approach it in a very tenuous way where we look at them and say, we're here if you need us, but you don't tell them what's going to happen. Instead, you realize that each person is going to interpret and experience these type of trials in different ways. And the best thing that we can do is remind them that we too have been through it in different ways. If they need us, we will be there. And that's where I want to end that video. I hope you guys have a blessed day. I hope this makes sense, and I hope you guys are grounding your energies and celebrating where you can celebrate and being there for one another, because in the end, it's all about community, because community is family for a great deal of people.